Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and stay with us for more powerful real-life stories. Now, let's get into today's story. I never thought that my last years on this earth would be filled with betrayal, greed, and heartbreak. For most of my life, I believed I had raised a family that valued love over money, loyalty over possessions, and unity over pride. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. My name is Eleanor Whitford, and I am 76 years old. I spent most of my life building a home, not just a house, but a true sanctuary. My late husband, Charles, and I bought this house nearly 50 years ago when we were just starting our lives together. It wasn't grand back then. Just a small two-story brick house with creaky wooden floors, leaky pipes, and drafty windows. But with time, with patience, and with love, we turned it into something extraordinary. Every wall holds memories. Every corner carries laughter, tears, and the history of our family. When Charles passed away 10 years ago, I thought my children would rally around me, support me, and cherish the house that symbolized everything he and I built. I thought they would protect it because it was more than property, it was legacy. But instead, what I saw was their eyes shift. Not toward me, not toward love, but toward the value of what the house was worth. I have 3 children. Michael, the oldest at 48, a corporate lawyer who has always believed that money and success were the measures of a man. Claire, the middle child at 44, a woman who wears kindness like a mask but hides ambition sharper than any knife. And Daniel, the youngest at 39, the dreamer, the wanderer, who always said he wanted nothing but freedom, but whose debts followed him like shadows. 4 years after Charles died, they all behaved. They acted like dutiful children, visiting me, calling me, pretending to care. But beneath their words, beneath their gestures, I could feel it, the tension. The way Michael lingered around the house, asking about its value. The way Claire suggested I downsize, sell, and move into a retirement community. The way Daniel hinted he could take care of the house if I let him stay here permanently. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself they were just concerned. That maybe I was imagining things. But it wasn't imagination. It was greed, waiting for its moment to strike. The moment came one cold autumn evening. I had just returned from my garden, carrying a basket of apples I had picked myself. My knees ached, my back groaned, but I was content. When I walked into the living room, all 3 of my children were sitting there, waiting. The air was heavy. They weren't smiling. Their eyes didn't look at me with warmth. Instead, they looked at each other like predators circling prey. Michael cleared his throat first. "Mom," he said in that lawyerly tone of his, clipped and precise. "We need to talk about the future. About your house." I frowned. My house? What about it? Claire leaned forward, her hands folded neatly in her lap like she was some kind of saint. "Mother, we're just worried about you. This house is too big. Too much work. Don't you think it would be better to sell it and move somewhere easier? A retirement community, perhaps." Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, that's convenient. Sell the house so you 2 can split the money. Don't pretend this is about Mom's well-being. We all know this house is worth a fortune now. The land alone is valuable." Michael turned to him sharply. "Don't be ridiculous, Daniel. You've never contributed a single cent to this family. You've only ever taken. If anyone should make decisions about the property, it should be Claire and me." I raised my hand to silence them. "Enough. This house is not yours to fight over. I am still alive. It belongs to me, and when the time comes, it will be handled in my will." But they didn't stop. Over the following weeks, they began circling me like vultures. Michael started visiting more often, bringing documents, just in case something happened to me. Claire would call daily, suggesting retirement homes, sending me brochures, saying I deserved better. Daniel, meanwhile, became desperate. He begged to move in permanently, saying he was drowning in debt and that the house could save him. I felt trapped in my own home, suffocated by the very children I had raised. The more they pushed, the more I withdrew. But inside me, something else began to grow. Anger. Because what they didn't know was that I had already written my will years ago. And none of them were going to get the house. The truth was, after Charles passed, I saw their greed even then. I knew one day they would circle this house like wolves. So I made a decision. This house would go to someone who truly valued it. Someone who saw it as a home, not a paycheck. That someone was my granddaughter, Emily, Claire's only daughter. She was 22 now, studying architecture, and every time she visited, she would sit with me, asking about the history of the house, the design, the garden, the stories in its walls. She loved it for what it was, not what it was worth. But I couldn't tell my children yet. If they knew, they would destroy me, manipulate Emily, maybe even contest the will. So I kept it a secret. One night, I overheard something that shattered me completely. I was upstairs, the floorboards creaking under my weight, when I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen. Michael and Claire were whispering. "She's getting weaker," Michael said. "It won't be long now. Once she's gone, we sell the house. We split everything 50-50. Daniel doesn't get a dime." Claire's voice was calm, calculated. "Agreed. But we'll need to make sure the will reflects that. We can't risk her giving it to Daniel out of pity." I covered my mouth to stop myself from gasping. My own children were speaking about me like I was already dead. My heart pounded, my hands shook. I wanted to storm down there, scream at them, tell them I heard everything. But instead, I retreated into my room, shut the door, and cried silently into my pillow. From that moment, something inside me hardened. They thought I was weak, frail, ready to go. But they were wrong. I wasn't done yet. If they wanted to fight over my house, then I would make sure the fight destroyed them, not me. The following days, I began observing more carefully. Daniel, for all his flaws, wasn't part of their little conspiracy. He was selfish, yes, and drowning in his own mess, but he hadn't plotted against me. He was more reckless than cruel. But Michael and Claire? They were snakes, waiting for me to die so they could feast. So, I started planning. I invited them over more often, pretending to be weaker than I was. I let my hands shake a little more, let my steps falter, let my voice quiver. I wanted them to believe I was close to the end. And it worked. They circled tighter, thinking victory was near. Michael brought a lawyer friend one evening, under the pretense of helping me organize my affairs. He slid papers across the table, urging me to sign them. "Just so everything is easier when the time comes," he said smoothly. I glanced at the documents. They were cleverly written, but I wasn't a fool. He was trying to make me sign over control of the estate. I smiled sweetly, pretending not to understand, then pushed the papers back. "I'll think about it, dear." Claire, meanwhile, brought brochures of expensive retirement communities, urging me to enjoy my last years with comfort. She painted pictures of staff taking care of me, of new friends, of leisure. But behind her smile, her eyes gleamed with hunger. "And Daniel," he begged again, one night, his eyes bloodshot, smelling of whiskey. "Please, Mom, let me move in. Just for a while. I'll take care of you. You won't even notice me." I looked at him and saw the boy he used to be, lost, broken, desperate for help. But I also knew letting him in would only bring chaos. "Still," I said softly, "not now, Daniel. Not now." As the weeks went by, their desperation grew. And so did my resolve. Because if they wanted a war over my house, then I would give them one. The tension in the house was almost unbearable. After weeks of carefully observing Michael and Claire, I knew exactly what they were capable of. They thought I was weak, fragile, a grandmother at the mercy of time. But I was far from powerless. In fact, the more they pushed, the more determined I became to turn their greed against them. I began by carefully inviting them over one evening under the pretense of a family dinner. I cooked their favorite dishes: Michael's roasted chicken, Claire's creamy pasta, and Daniel's mashed potatoes. Emily, my sweet granddaughter, was also invited. She was the only one in the family who truly understood the meaning of this house, who appreciated its history and warmth, not just its monetary value. As we sat around the table, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Michael and Claire exchanged subtle glances, each trying to gauge the other's intentions. Daniel nervously fidgeted with his fork, aware that something was brewing but unable to articulate it. Emily, as always, sat quietly, observing everything with a wisdom that seemed beyond her years. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence. "I have an announcement to make," I said, my voice calm but commanding. "It concerns the future of this house." Michael's eyes gleamed. Claire's lips pressed into a tight line. Daniel looked both hopeful and anxious. Emily simply leaned forward, curiosity shining in her eyes. "I know you've all been thinking about what will happen here," I continued, watching their reactions carefully. "And I want to make one thing absolutely clear. This house is not for sale, and it will not be divided among you in the way you might expect." Michael stiffened, the fork in his hand trembling slightly. Claire's face remained calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. Daniel let out a nervous chuckle, trying to mask his disappointment. Emily's eyes widened, a small smile forming as she sensed that something was about to shift. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You see," I said slowly, "I have already made arrangements for the house's future. It will go to someone who truly appreciates it, someone who sees it as a home, not as a possession to fight over." Michael's jaw tightened. "Mom, I don't understand. This house has been in our family for generations. Why would you bypass your own children?" Claire interjected smoothly. "Eleanor, surely you understand that we all have contributed to the family in our own ways. Isn't it only fair that we are considered?" I looked directly at both of them, my gaze steady and unyielding. Fairness is not about entitlement. It's about understanding, love, and respect. And clearly, you two have failed to demonstrate those qualities. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but I could see relief in his eyes. At least one of them, perhaps, could still be reasoned with. Emily's small hand reached across the table to touch mine, a silent reassurance that she was on my side. Michael's voice rose slightly, tinged with anger. "You can't do this, Mom. We have a right to this house. You can't just—" I raised my hand to silence him. "Enough, Michael. This house is not yours to claim. And let me make it perfectly clear. I have consulted legal experts, and the will has been finalized years ago. There is nothing you can do to change it." Claire's calm exterior faltered for just a moment, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Eleanor, surely you're not serious. You can't." "Yes, Claire, I am serious," I interrupted. "And if either of you attempt to challenge the will or manipulate anyone in this family, I promise you there will be consequences." The room fell silent. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional clink of silverware against plates. Daniel exhaled quietly, leaning back in his chair, while Emily's eyes sparkled with pride and understanding. After dinner, I retreated to my study. I needed to prepare for what was coming next. Michael and Claire would not accept this decision lightly. Their greed was too strong, their sense of entitlement too deeply ingrained. They would find a way to manipulate, to deceive, to undermine me. And I needed to be ready. Over the next several days, subtle maneuvers began. Michael tried to pull me aside, asking to discuss legal strategies for the estate, pretending he had my best interests at heart. Claire called constantly, offering unsolicited advice on my health, suggesting I consider moving to a smaller residence. Daniel continued to plead for temporary residence, and Emily stayed by my side, a quiet pillar of support. I realized that the key to defeating them was not confrontation but patience. They were predictable, driven by greed and fear of loss. And with each attempt they made to manipulate me, I learned more about their weaknesses. One afternoon, I received a call from Michael, his tone syrupy with false concern. "Mom, I think we should talk about the house again. Maybe there's a compromise. Surely you don't want family tension to escalate." I smiled, though he could not see it. "Michael, I appreciate your concern, but I assure you, everything has been carefully arranged. There is no compromise to be had. The house will go to Emily." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a forced laugh. "Emily? That little girl? You can't be serious." "Oh, I am serious," I said firmly. "She understands the value of home, of family, and of history. Something you and Claire seem to have forgotten." By now, Michael's patience was wearing thin, and I knew it. The more he tried to argue, the more I could see his frustration building, the cracks forming in his composure. That was exactly what I needed. Claire was more subtle, more cunning. She began visiting under the guise of helping me organize, but every visit revealed more about her character. She snooped through drawers, made notes, and asked leading questions about the will. But she underestimated my vigilance. Every move she made, I recorded silently, every slip captured in memory and written in my mental ledger. Daniel remained a wild card. He was emotionally vulnerable, and though he did not scheme like Michael and Claire, he had his own desires and desperation. He begged, pleaded, sometimes became angry. But I began to use his honesty as a shield. His innocence, or at least his lack of pretense, made him useful in countering the deception of his siblings. Emily, meanwhile, was learning. I began to involve her more in the daily life of the house, explaining its architecture, the history of each room, the significance of the garden. She absorbed everything, showing an appreciation that warmed my heart. She never questioned my decisions, never doubted my judgment. She was my confidant, my ally, and eventually the rightful heir. One evening, Michael and Claire escalated. They cornered me in the living room, attempting to coerce me into reconsidering the house. Michael, in a rare display of arrogance, waved legal documents in my face. "Mom, just sign these. It will make everything easier. Don't make this complicated." Claire added her voice, sweet but venomous. "It's for everyone's good, Eleanor. You don't want this to become a legal nightmare, do you?" I looked at them calmly, and then I began to speak. "You know, when Charles and I built this house, we built it with love. Not with contracts, not with greed, but with love. Every brick, every beam, every corner holds memories. And those memories are not for sale. They are not for you to fight over. They belong to someone who truly understands them, someone who values them, someone who will protect them." Their faces turned pale. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that I was not the frail woman they believed me to be. I had always been strong, but now they saw that strength in its full force. "You've underestimated me for too long," I continued, my voice rising with controlled intensity. "This house will go to Emily. And any attempt to interfere, any attempt to challenge my decision, will be met with the full force of the law and my resolve. You think I am weak? You are wrong. I am stronger than you will ever be." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "No more words. Leave this house tonight. And think carefully about what you are doing, because your actions will have consequences, and I will ensure that justice is served." They left that night, slamming the door in anger and frustration. Daniel watched silently, and Emily hugged me tightly, whispering, "Grandma, I understand. I'll protect it." That night, I sat in the study, listening to the silence, feeling a sense of peace. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt that the scales were tipping in my favor. I had patience, cunning, and foresight. They had greed, arrogance, and impatience. Over the following weeks, Michael and Claire tried every trick in the book: slander, manipulation, emotional blackmail. But every attempt failed. I had anticipated them all. Each misstep they made, each scheme they tried, only strengthened my position. Daniel, still vulnerable, began to see the full extent of their treachery. For the first time, he realized that family is not just about blood but about trust, respect, and loyalty. Emily remained steadfast, learning the delicate balance of strategy and compassion. And I, Eleanor Whitford, watched it all unfold, knowing that the house would remain safe, the legacy preserved, and justice served, not through vengeance born of hatred, but through careful, deliberate action. The weeks passed, and the tension in the Whitford house grew almost unbearable. Michael and Claire had tried every tactic they could think of, each one failing spectacularly, yet they refused to back down. Every visit, every call, every attempt to manipulate me only confirmed my resolve. They thought I was vulnerable, that age had weakened me, but what they didn't know was that I had never been stronger. I continued to play my part carefully. I allowed them to believe that they were winning, that I was slowly succumbing to age and fatigue. Michael brought his legal documents again, pretending to offer help while subtly trying to intimidate me. Claire suggested moving to a smaller home, framing it as convenience and comfort, all while her eyes glimmered with hidden greed. Daniel, ever the hopeful dreamer, remained by my side, watching but not interfering, while Emily quietly learned the lessons of strategy, patience, and resilience. One rainy evening, I called all 3 children for dinner once more. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm within the house. Michael arrived first, his suit damp from the rain, his expression taut with controlled anger. Claire followed, her perfectly styled hair slightly frizzed from the weather, carrying her usual smug smile. Daniel trailed behind, shoulders hunched, eyes flicking nervously between his older siblings. Emily arrived last, cheerful despite the storm, a quiet confidence in her demeanor. I greeted them warmly, hiding the determination in my eyes. We sat at the table, candles flickering, casting shadows that danced across the walls. I served the meal meticulously, each dish a careful balance of comfort and subtlety, designed to disarm them, make them comfortable, lower their guard. After a few moments of tense silence, I spoke. I want to talk about the house. Michael's fingers tightened around his fork. Claire's eyes remained calm but sharp. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Emily looked at me with understanding, her small hand brushing against mine. I have been patient, I began, my voice calm but firm. I have listened to your arguments, your pleas, your manipulations. But the truth remains, this house is not for sale. It will not be divided as you might expect. And it will not go to the highest bidder among you. Michael's jaw tightened. Mom, this is absurd. You can't just... Enough, Michael, I interrupted. I have made my decision, and it will not change. This house will go to Emily. She understands its value. She appreciates it. She will protect it. Claire's composed exterior faltered slightly. Emily? That child. She doesn't have the experience or understanding. She has something far more important, I cut in sharply. She has respect, love, and the wisdom to honor what this house represents. You, on the other hand, have shown nothing but greed and entitlement. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of relief and awe crossing his face. Michael slammed his hand lightly on the table, a sharp sound that echoed through the room. Claire rose to her feet, her voice icy. This is unfair. You can't bypass your own children like this. I remained seated, unwavering. Fairness is not about blood or entitlement. It is about character. And you have failed to demonstrate the character necessary to preserve this home. The storm outside intensified, rain pounding against the windows. It was as though the weather itself mirrored the rising tension in the room. Michael's face darkened, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind, plotting, scheming, calculating. Claire's expression hardened, a mask of civility covering the storm brewing beneath. Daniel, for once, was silent, absorbing the reality of the situation. Emily simply smiled, her eyes reflecting understanding and determination. I let the silence stretch, letting every word hang in the air. The clock ticked loudly, emphasizing the gravity of the moment. Finally, I continued. Any attempt to challenge my decision, any interference with Emily's future, will not be tolerated. I have already consulted the best legal experts, and every contingency has been accounted for. You will find no loopholes, no weaknesses, no opportunities to undermine this decision. Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. You are making a huge mistake, Mom. This is our family. We have rights. You have rights to nothing but disappointment, I interrupted, my voice steady and commanding. This is not a negotiation. This is a declaration. You will respect it or face the consequences of your actions. Claire, unable to maintain her composure any longer, crossed her arms. And what if we refuse? What if we challenge you legally? You may try, I said calmly, but you will fail. Your greed blinds you, and your impatience will be your undoing. I have anticipated every move, every scheme, every manipulation you are capable of. You cannot outwit me because you have underestimated the strength of a woman who has fought for her family and her home her entire life. The room was silent once more. Michael's fists were clenched, but he said nothing. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, her pride wounded. Daniel let out a quiet sigh, and Emily reached over to touch my hand, offering silent support. Over the following days, their attempts became more desperate. Michael tried to bribe friends, attempting to gain influence over local authorities. Claire attempted emotional manipulation, pleading with neighbors and acquaintances to intervene. Daniel, ever the peacekeeper, tried to mediate, but even his good intentions were met with hostility from his siblings. Emily remained steadfast, supporting me quietly, learning the subtle strategies of observation, patience, and timing. I realized that this was no longer about the house alone. It was about character, integrity, and justice. The house had become a battlefield for values, and I was determined that it would be preserved not for greed but for respect and love. One evening, I devised a plan that would test Michael and Claire completely. I invited them for a private meeting in the study, under the guise of discussing minor matters related to the estate. I knew their curiosity and arrogance would draw them in, making them vulnerable. When they arrived, I greeted them warmly, concealing my true intentions. The room was lit softly, the shadows playing across the walls, creating an atmosphere of quiet tension. I offered tea and biscuits, observing their reactions closely. As they relaxed slightly, believing they had me cornered, I began to speak. I want to ensure that you both understand the implications of your actions. Every attempt to manipulate or undermine the house, every attempt to coerce me or Emily, will have consequences beyond your imagination. Michael's lips pressed together, a vein throbbing at his temple. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. And what, Eleanor, do you propose we do? Sit idly by while the estate is unfairly assigned? You will do nothing, I said firmly. You will respect my wishes, and you will accept the outcome. Emily will inherit the house, and any interference will be met with legal and personal repercussions. I have prepared for this for years, anticipating every move, every strategy you could employ. You are too predictable, too blinded by greed to succeed. The realization began to dawn on them, slowly, painfully. They understood that their attempts to manipulate me had failed. Their confidence wavered, their arrogance crumbling. Daniel observed silently, the weight of truth settling upon him, while Emily's calm presence reinforced the inevitability of the outcome. Over the next few weeks, I continued to fortify my position. Every document, every conversation, every visit was meticulously recorded and remembered. Michael and Claire grew increasingly frustrated, their schemes becoming reckless and poorly thought out. Daniel remained cautious, aware of the tension but unwilling to engage in conflict. Emily continued to learn and support, a quiet yet steadfast presence. Finally, the day arrived when I felt that justice would be served completely. I called a family meeting, the final gathering where I would reveal the outcome of my long deliberation and careful planning. The room was filled with anticipation, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael and Claire, exhausted from their relentless plotting, arrived with forced smiles and guarded expressions. Daniel followed, silent but attentive, while Emily walked in with quiet confidence. I addressed them all with calm authority. The time has come to clarify the future of this house. After much consideration, I have decided that the house will belong to Emily. She has demonstrated understanding, respect, and love for what this home represents. You, Michael and Claire, have repeatedly demonstrated greed, manipulation, and entitlement. This house is not for you. Michael's face turned red with rage. You can't do this. We are your children. You can't. Watch me, I interrupted firmly. This decision is final, legally binding, and morally justified. Any attempts to interfere will fail and will only bring consequences upon yourselves. Claire's eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing. Daniel nodded slowly, a mixture of relief and acceptance crossing his face. Emily smiled gently, her hand brushing mine, a silent acknowledgement of our shared understanding. The struggle was over. The battle had been fought not with brute force but with patience, foresight, and unwavering resolve. The house, the legacy of Charles and myself, was safe, and those who had sought to exploit it had been exposed for what they truly were. In the days that followed, Michael and Claire retreated from the house, their schemes thwarted, their arrogance humbled. Daniel remained, more understanding of the complexities of family, loyalty, and integrity. Emily flourished, embracing the responsibility and honor of preserving our family home. And I, Eleanor Whitford, finally felt the peace I had sought for so many years. The house stood as a testament not to wealth or entitlement, but to love, wisdom, and justice.